This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Hello, welcome to Stock Box. Clontarf Energy have just released their interim statement. Here to tell us more about it is the chairman, David Horgan. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us today. Now, let's take a closer look at your interim statement released just on Friday. So in Bolivia, you've been focusing on clean lithium brines. Your RNS states that Bolivia have committed themselves to accelerating lithium battery exports. In what way have they done this?
Well, there's been rapid progress in recent weeks and months, but we're like a nuclear submarine in that people can't see the progress on the surface. But basically, the Bolivians have made a very strong political commitment to becoming a major exporter, which may sound trivial to business people, but for them, it's a big thing because they see themselves being superseded by Australia and to some extent, Chile and Argentina, whereas they've got the best deposits, the cleanest and largest brine deposits. And they've made a decision to grasp the nettle, and they've done that in a number of decisive ways. They've replaced some of the senior managers, the minister and the head of the lithium company, and they've put in a very decisive decision maker, former head of refining in the oil company, who's a hard ass. You know, he's going to get things done. So they put DEI to one side, I think quite correctly, because they need to move forward now. They need to be a player in the market. Also, they've pushed ahead with the negotiations. Now, the process has taken a few weeks longer than originally scheduled, which is no surprise when you're dealing with Whitehall. And basically what they've done is they've tried to finish off the heritage convenios or contracts from 3 years ago that were signed with Russian and Chinese state oil companies, or state lithium companies, all backed by the state. And they're trying to get those across the line subject to parliamentary ratification, which is fine, because they already have some facilities in country. And then they're going to move into the successful companies from the recent bid round process or convocatoria. And what they've said to us, which makes complete sense, given that they have an election coming up next autumn, they're going to deal, first of all, with the companies that have said to them that they have operating plants, which are all Chinese. There's 3 Chinese companies. So the former boss of YLB, the lithium company, has been to China, done her due diligence. Didn't go 100% well, as I understand, but they're going through the process. And the only other company that's not Chinese is Italian, but they're not in direct lithium extraction. They're in water treatment. And we've been told verbally that as soon as those negotiations are underway, we will be treated as the first company in Stream 2. Originally, we were supposed to be at Stream 3, now Stream 2. And the reason is that we have our plant ready to go in Mumbai. And we've run initial synthetic brines, and we've run the initial smaller samples through the plant. But the bulk samples that we need to run to maximize the recovery from the actual Bolivian brines, they need to be collected and shipped to Mumbai. That takes 2 months. Just the world is a big place. As soon as it goes, our Indian partner is working on the paperwork. As soon as those bulk samples are received at site, they will be run through the plant, which will take about a month. We're hoping to have an early due diligence visit by senior technicians from the Bolivian side, hopefully in January, February. And what we've proposed is that we will then deploy a plant, obviously subject to their approval, to one or more Bolivian salaries or salt lakes. And we would like to have our plant operating in the mid-year of 2025.
Right. And that's in Mumbai.
Well, no, the plant's already in Mumbai, and it's ready operating on synthetic brines. But we want to deploy the plant. But basically, it's designed to be modular. So you fit it into a number of 20 or 40 foot containers, and you ship it to site. As much as possible will be done in Mumbai. Like, you want to have the minimum of connections, etc., at 5,000 meters of altitude. So we'll be pouring concrete, getting the pads in place, getting the power, etc., set up, and we will plug and play. That's the basic logic. And the idea would be that we would deploy up to 5 plants over the next couple of years to rapidly increase production. So we're ready to go.
Yeah, wonderful. Sounds very promising. I mean, let's just come back a little bit to Bolivia. Now, you mentioned the law changes there. Royalty increases for local communities are to come into effect. So how will local communities benefit?
Yeah, this was a difficult thing over recent years. I was one of the people arguing for it because in Bolivia, the local people traditionally have not benefited from mining booms. You had the 18th century silver boom, you had the World War II boom in strategic metals, and they're hyper aware of that. They're not against mining because they're miners themselves.
Yes.
They're basically smugglers and miners in that part of the country, and but they're good people, yeah. And I always love talking to them. You always get an interesting perspective on life, but they do want cash. Not just the promises of government spending. They want some control over some cash, and the government has come around to that view, and they're reforming the Bolivian lithium law. And basically, as I understand it, they'll give 5 to 8% of the revenues to the local state or the local province. And subject to controls, obviously, they will be in a position to spend that money on local infrastructure, schools, hospitals, clinics, etc., etc. And I think that's only a positive thing. I think the people are pretty prudent. Typically they have ladies running the budgets in the local communities, and they're pretty good managers of their funds. I wouldn't worry about governance. And it's taken them a long time to grasp that nettle, but now they're pushing that legislation through Parliament, and the person driving it through is a lady senator, and she's very impressive. She doesn't take no for an answer, so I think they'll get it done, and it makes sense because there's something in it for everyone. For a deal to work, it has to work for everyone. Yes. If someone feels aggrieved that they're being screwed, they're going to obstruct you, so everyone has to be motivated.
That's right. Now, let's move over to the EU. So the EU is building a Team Europe approach. They passed a Critical Minerals Act and deploying circa €4 billion from the Global Gateway Fund. Now, where does Clontarf sit within this?
Well, we were invited initially through the good offices of our embassy in Buenos Aires to participate. And I was initially skeptical, because you hear about Washington and Brussels and you think they're never going to do anything. But once we got involved in the state trips to Argentina and Bolivia, and we were brought into the Team Europe, I was shocked at the speed and energy of progress. Part of the reason is that it's been led by a very decisive gentleman called Felix Fernandez Shaw. His very powerful personality, direct relationship with Ursula von der Leyen, and he's really displayed leadership. It wouldn't have happened without him. Like in the last meeting, we had a series of bankers and international development bodies, as well as major companies and ourselves. And the bankers were being very bankerly. They were saying, "Oh well, if you guarantee, then we can forward the money." And he took charge of the meeting, and he said, there were about 40 people present. He said, "Look, this is going to be done, and I'm going to drive it. And the people who are going to make it happen are the people in this room. And none of you will be allowed to leave unless you make this happen." And nobody gainsaid him. I was delighted, because we've been making these points for a long time. And that's leadership. You rarely see it in business, and you even rarely see it with Sir Humphrey. But that's leadership. And it was exactly what he needed to do. He needed to show that this was going to happen. So the bankers and the functionaries, they're no longer worried about, is this going to work or not? Now they know it's going to work. And now we're down to working out the details. And what the EU wants is, they want basically, 30% of world supply going to European off-takers. And we've been talking to the off-takers. And what's really striking is the off-takers, their attitude has completely changed in the last 6-7 years. Now they want supply. No one's worried about, the spot price in the Chinese market. No one believes it. No one expects to get supplies at that price. They want supply, and they're suddenly panicked over it. A bit like the Americans. The Americans passed this so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Now everyone is hyper aware that we're dependent on China for mining in many critical minerals, but particularly for processing. And that's not sustainable in a world where there are geopolitical tensions. So they want some measure of independence. Now, it'll take time. It won't be perfect, but it is going to happen.
But also with Clontarf, you're also offering clean lithium brines as well, aren't you? Whereas I know that other places in the world might not be doing that, such as China.
And that's the big dirty secret of the whole green transition, that many of the minerals that are being used, for your EVs and your grid storage are actually quite dirty in how they're mined and processed. And Bolivia is unique in that it has this very low cost, clean source of brines. And until that hasn't been an issue in the EV market, to my surprise. But it was actually the Australians who told me about this, because they've been a huge success in mining and developing mines for the Chinese processing. And they say, look, we're really worried about this because, we sell our hard rock to Chinese refineries to burn for 2 days in coal-fired furnaces. All the virtue signaling Tesla drivers out there listening to us are completely oblivious to this. But sooner or later, some Oxfam or other pesky NGO is going to focus on this issue, and it's going to be an embarrassment. And just to give you an illustration of what that means financially, one of the major German off-takers told us that they anticipate paying a 30% premium for green lithium by 2030. Now, 30% premium was almost unknown in a commodity, but it shows you where they think the market's going. So we're in the sweet spot now, but the biggest danger would be to be diffident, to let more delays creep into the system. And that's why we've been pressing our Bolivian friends, in your own interest, forget about us, in your own interest, drive this thing forward now. Because if you wait 20 years, who knows what the technology that will dominate in 20 years will be. This is an opportunity to take now.
And that's what they've been doing with the law changes. They've had some governmental changes as well that you've mentioned there, so that they've placed themselves in that position, ready for it. But let's look at the proposed action plan from Clontarf that was also released in your RNS for the coming weeks and months, so that you're looking to collect samples, as you mentioned, by October 2024 for shipping to your partner's Mumbai plant for processing in January 2025. Now, I know you've touched on this already, David, but is this likely to be on schedule? And you mentioned that Indian paperwork still needs to be completed. So how's that going?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about the Indian paperwork so much because our partner in India is a $17 billion large chemical company. They're moving commodities in and out all the time. There wasn't an issue with the synthetic brines, so I wouldn't worry about that. Like, I wouldn't like to navigate Indian bureaucracy, but they seem to be able to do it very profitably and successfully. They're also doing work. I can't tell you who it is, but they're also doing work for Tesla, among other companies in the United States. So this is a serious company. So I wouldn't worry about that. The delay has really been on the Bolivian side, and it's people say, well, if you're so well connected, why have they not just given a sample? But they had given us samples. Most of the other companies have not got any samples, and we've got several sets of samples. But by law, they have to collect them. So using their drill rig and their trucks, they got to collect them. We've bought the 320 bulk containers, which we've got from imports from Saudi Aramco. So they're all ready to go. We've bought them. We've solved the logistics. Half of any battle, a general will tell you, is logistics. So we've solved the logistics, truck them to the coast, get them on a ship, probably transshipment through Panama. So they should be in Mumbai within 2 months of delivery. So what the Bolivians say is that as soon as they've already given us approval, and we've met with the last two chiefs of the lithium company, said legally, we want you to be formally in negotiations. So like the first day of negotiations, we can deliver these samples.
So what's the process from there? Tell us more about your key milestones that you've mentioned in the RNS.
Well, the technology has worked very well, the direct lithium extraction technology with the initial samples and the lithium brines. But our model is to not just recover lithium profitably, but to recover the other economic minerals, such as magnesium. One of the salarios that we're targeting has high magnesium content, and magnesium prices are quite high. And apparently we're the only company that had that approach. But it does complicate the production testing, because if you're only maximizing for one variable, then you can fine tune for that particular variable. But if you're trying to maximize the economic rate of return, it's like a linear program. You have to tweak the lithium and the magnesium and any other economic mineral, and then also tweak the impurities so that you're not being constrained in any way. Because if you're looking for a price premium, you want to give the very best product to the very most demanding battery manufacturer. And that means you need larger volumes. So that's why we need the 320 tons. So there was a bit of an explanation necessary to explain why we needed so many tons when they'd given us samples before. But I think they're now on site, and they like the idea of maximizing the rate of return from more than one mineral. Because why waste it? Why put it into the tailings, which would be wasted maybe until someone comes along in 30 years to mine the tailings? Better to maximize the economic rate of return now.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you mentioned in your RNS, just to finish with this, David, is the long-term aim is to produce 150,000 tons of LCE by 2030. Is that Is that realistic? Is that achievable?
Yeah, I mean, LCE stands for lithium carbonate equivalent. Now, some of what you sell in the market is actually different chemistry, but everyone talks of LCE. And basically, the market's about 1 million tons a year now, rapidly growing, like 25% a year, expected to go to 2 to 3 million tons within a few short years. That's not me saying it, that's the off-takers, right? So 150,000 tons isn't as big as you would think. And to get the attention of the EU Commission and the major off-takers, you need to be talking in those volumes, because they're not interested in small production. But it needs several plants, each of which are modular, because the chemistry differs by salt lake, and you get best results by maximizing the output for the individual salt lake. And that's what the Bolivians want to hear as well. So I think it's entirely realistic, and particularly when the funding is more or less looked after now, because the EU is providing the bulk of the funding through its global gateway. And how that works is they don't provide money typically to private companies, but they provide it to states, and the states invest in the infrastructure. And actually, Bolivia's been quite good at building infrastructure. We know well because my fellow director built a lot of the roads. He's a road engineer, and they're quite good at it. And it gives them a bit of patronage, to the local community in their own right. So basically, if 2/3 of the capex or capital expenditure is funded by EU soft funds, 20-year money, about 3% interest rate, that takes the bulk of the pain away. And now we've only got to really focus on funding the actual plant itself and working capital. And there, the off-takers are more than keen to be involved in the financing, because there is a scarcity. I mean, if you look at the market, even in the most conservative demand projections, there is no way that the current identified projects can deliver on the necessary supply, particularly when you factor in the permitting problems and objections from local residents in Canada or Australia, whatever, not such a big problem in Bolivia. So basically, there's no time to lose. We have to move forward as fast as possible.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like as Clontarf, you're well placed for this as well. But it's been wonderful speaking to you today, David, and no doubt we'll be catching up with you again soon here at Stockbox to hear about your next steps and how it's all going.
Many thanks, Pam.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programmes at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.